These are some analysis tools. We went through a lot of these. The WhatIf Analysis, we can do maybe a scenario manager to show you that. Forecast sheet is something we can look at. So let's take a look at a couple of these. Let's do our forecast. If you go to File, Open, and open up this file called Forecast. Basically what it is, it's a sheet that has some data in it. See, here it's got some data in it, all this data here, but then there's a bunch of data that's missing. And so what it does is it actually, based on the previous information, it forecasts what the future will look like. So if I highlight all this data here, including those blank areas, we will see a forecast. So we go to our forecast, data, forecast sheet. There's our basically our forecast. I say create, creates my chart, and it tells me what the future is going to look like. So, forecasts might be useful. The WhatIf Analysis, we can look at that. We have a section we're going to talk about in the book too, but we're going to do it right now. Go to File, Open, Browse, and we're going to go down to Scenario. I think of a file called Scenario. Scenario. Open the file called Scenario. Go to Example 1. So this is a very simple example, but Scenario Manager is pretty great for dealing with lots of data. So here's my scenario here. So here's some scenario values. So it looks like that my scenario period of, it says here, create a scenario of high scenario, which is 20% and 10%. Then create a scenario for average commission, which is 15 and 10. And create a scenario for low commission, is 10 and 10. So we're going to select these fields here, and we're going to create a scenario, and we're going to change these values based on the scenario. So you go to Data, go to WhatIf Analysis, click on the Scenario Manager, and delete that. We're going to add a scenario called High, for high revenue. There's my high right there. I'll say OK, and that's going to be, for high is going to be 20%. Actually 0.20 and 0.10. I'm adding that to the scenario manager. I'll create another scenario called average, and that's OK. That's going to be 15 and 10. So 0.15, 0.10. Add that to the scenario manager. I'll create another scenario called low. And that's going to be 10 and 10. So 0.10, 0.10. And add that to the scenario manager. Okay, so I just created a scenario for high, average, and low. If I wanted to use the average values, I can simply say show that, and it displays that value. If I say average, I can show that values. I can choose low and choose that. That's really all the scenario managers. It's like 3 different scenarios. But you can imagine if I have maybe 10 parameters, say I go to a department and I ask a certain level of questions. What's the average salaries? What's the high salary? What's the low salary? And I ask all kinds of information about departmental, number of people in the department, those kinds of things. So I'd have all that information listed here, but I have to do that with every department. So if I have 10 parameters that I'm using in my scenario, that's a little bit more difficult to keep track of. I could use the scenario manager to choose Department 1, show me Department 1's data, Department 2, Department 3. So I can go through and display all the parameters associated with it. With just 2 parameters, we're just kind of showing you how it works. But you could use it for collecting and gathering a lot of stuff. You could also come along and just put those in a database and put all the answers out there. But that makes things a little bit more complicated. Even in a presentation mode, this would work really nice because then you can look at each scenario one at a time. That's what your scenario manager is. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to go through the add-ins. So go to File, Options, and we're going to choose the word add-in. Okay, so these are add-in programs. You have this thing called this Analysis Tool Pack. You got the Power Pivot for Excel, which is where I'm going to touch on in just a minute. So we're definitely going to add that one in. You look at the Power Pivot for Excel. It's a COM add-in. So you have to make sure that your status on the bottom says COM add-in. And then you simply say Go. You have all these options in here. It looks like I have a PDF thing. Here's my Power Pivot for Excel. It's checked already. And you have a Power Map, a Power View. There's all these other tools. There's a Power BI thing too. So then you just say, okay, those features will be added in there. If I go to File, Options again, there is this Analysis Tool Pack that we can add in. There's a Solver add-in. So these are a couple of things we can add. Let's do the Solver add-in. Looks like that's an Excel add-in. So we say Go. And there's my Solver add-in. You can choose that. Here's your Analysis Tool Pack. Then say OK. So what that did, it actually created some additional code in the system. Go to the Data Ribbon tab, and it actually put it right over here. So here's my data analysis, and here's my solver. So again, you might go to the internet, and it says, here's a solution, but it's an add-on program. So what you do is you install that program on your system, and then it will appear in the add-on list. So it's an Excel installation program, and you just install it, and the installation program knows where to put the code in order for it to appear in that list. And then you go to that list, that add-in list, and whatever you added in, whatever you installed will be listed in that list. But these are just additional tools. If I click on this analysis tool here, there's just all these analysis tools that we could use. So there's exponential smoothing, there's all this stuff in here. Like let's do one real quick. Let's do how about just a random generator number? How about a sampling? Do a sampling. So okay. It says, okay, you want to do a sampling. The input range is going to be, you just click on a field. That's the input range. And you can choose, it's a random generator. Number of samples I want is maybe 2 samples. And then, so it's a tool that comes up with a random generator, random sampling type thing. Do that, and it comes up with 2 numbers. See? So it just comes up with a random number is all it does. And each time you run, it's going to come up with a different random number. So whatever it's worth, I mean, this is just one tool of many tools that you can use. But again, you might have an analysis tool that you might want to add in and actually do that. There's analysis tools for various things. Like I was working at a mining company one time, and they had an analysis tool that you can add in to do mining analysis. So it basically is a special tool that does special calculations, and it's all customized around mining and it's putting samples of rocks in there. Then you do some analysis on it to have it do it. There's just a lot of add-on capabilities that you could use, just knowing that the add-on capability is there, that if you ever have a need for that, you'll know what the add-in command is.